So we shall start with today's session. A very good morning. Yesterday we have started with the applications of radioisotopes. In this regard, we have seen that how the radioisotopes are important to resolve so many problems which are arised in chemistry, particularly to resolve the problems arising in certain reactions or into day-to-day life. So it is one of the most important outcome of the radioisotopes. We have seen that radioactive activity has a widespread applications in different fields of science and technology, as we know. It may be emphasized that the use of the radioisotopes as labels is the only method to understand various problems. Yesterday we have seen in this regard one important problem, that is the formation of an ester. The isotopes are therefore much useful in tracing various processes. The technique of study is called the tracer technique. In this method, the radioisotope is applied at one end and at one end of the system, and the movement of this radioisotope is then traced by measuring the radioactivity in different parts of the system. So this is how we can trace or we can resolve any problem that is arised by using these radioisotope techniques. Yesterday we have seen one reaction that is a very well-known reaction of formation of a ester, where acetic acid and alcohol was used in order to prepare the ester. We have seen that experimentally it is not possible to investigate the elimination of water molecule in the esterification occurring either from the whether the acetic acid contributes OH minus ions and alcohol contributes H plus ions and vice versa. In this regard, we have seen that in order to resolve this problem, the alcohol, that is ethyl alcohol, that is prepared by using the radioisotope of oxygen, that is O18. And now if ethyl alcohol, if it is made up of the isotope of oxygen, then it is seen that the O18 which is present in alcohol goes into the ester, and this shows that the alcohol contributes H plus ions for the formation of water molecule. Indirectly, OH minus ions from acetic acid, those are also contributed by acetic acid. So this is how the water molecule is formed. So in brief, one can conclude that in the formation of a ester, alcohol contributes H plus ions, acetic acid contributes OH minus ions so as to form the water molecule. So this leads to a mechanistic study that the cleavages are COH bond in acetic acid and HO bond in alcohol, as all hydrogen and oxygen being alike in acetic acid and in alcohol. The study was not at all possible without isotopic labeling method. So this is how we have resolved the problem of esterification, where the formation of water in which the H plus ions are contributed by alcohol while OH minus ions are contributed by acetic acid. This is the first application of this isotopic labeling method. I would like to give you one more example of the isotopic labeling method in the determination of structure. As we know that PCl5, which is known as a phosphorus pentachloride, it is seen that in case of phosphorus pentachloride, all the chlorine atoms which are present are not similar or are not alike. So when in a particular molecule, when two or more atoms of the same element are present, it is rather difficult to solve the problem regarding their structural equivalence, because as we know while studying the hybridization, PCl5 molecule is where phosphorus has undergone sp3 dehybridization which is we have studied at our BSc 1 level. But here, all the chlorine atoms, they are not structurally equivalent. Now, how to resolve this problem? Here it is seen that phosphorus pentachloride that contains 5 chlorine atoms which are not at all alike. So how can we resolve this problem elegantly? So in doing so, the phosphorus pentachloride that is prepared by using phosphorus trichloride, that is PCl3, and a labeled chlorine, that is chlorine 36, Cl36, that is used. So I would like to show you one reaction where if a labeled radioisotope, if it is used, then we can resolve any problem with regard to the structural equivalence of any molecule. Just see here. Now, as we have seen that this is a second isotope that is known as the structural determination. Sometimes the question may be asked how the radioisotopes are used in structure determination. Here we have taken the example of PCl5. Here I would like to show you the diagrammatic representation of this PCl5 molecule. These are the 5 chlorine atoms like this. Now our problem, whether all the chlorides are structurally equivalent or they are different. In order to resolve this problem elegantly, here the phosphorus pentachloride, it is prepared out of phosphorus trichloride and a labeled chlorine. Here chlorine that is used is a chlorine 36, like this. Sometimes a MCQ based question may also be asked that in the structural determination, which isotope of chlorine is used. Normal normal isotope, which is 35.5, was not used, but chlorine 36, which is a stable isotope, that is used in the structural determination. So here this chlorine that is used is a radioisotope. Now by using this chlorine, the PCl5 molecule that is produced. In this case, 2 chlorides which are nothing but those are the radioactive or radioisotopes of chlorine. Now after formation of this PCl5 which contains the radiochlorine, here I would like to give a asterisk sign which indicates amongst these 5 chlorine atoms, 2 chloride atoms are the radioisotopes. On hydrolysis of this reaction, it can form a deadly poisonous gas that is known as a phosgene gas, and twice HCl is produced. Now, what does this characteristic reaction indicates? Out of 5 chlorine atoms, there are 2 sets, equivalent sets of the chlorine atoms. So 2 chlorine atoms are alike, and while 3 chlorine atoms are different. Because why these 2 chlorine atoms are different? Because they are radiochlorine and this is a normal chlorine. So whatever radioactivity that is assigned on hydrolysis of this reaction, that radioactivity lies with the acid. So this is a hydrochloric acid. That means those 2 chlorine atoms which are radioactive, those 2 chlorine atoms form hydrochloric acid and they goes to the acid. That means these these 3 chlorine atoms are different from these 2 chlorine atoms. This particular reaction also indicates that these 3 bonds, first bond, second bond, and third bond, which are known as the the equatorial bonds, and these are the 2 bonds which are present. One is at the top, another at the bottom. These are known as the axial bonds. These axial bond lengths, which are longer in length, while the equatorial bonds are shorter in length. So, as per the knowledge of chemistry, as we know that the bonds which are having longer length, or when the bond length increases, the bond strength decreases. That means longer bonds are always weak bonds, while shorter bonds are always strong bonds. Now, due to this reason, the phosphorus pentachloride thus produced in gaseous state that undergoes decomposition very easily, and it can form PCl3 and chlorine gas that is evolved during this reaction. So those two chlorine atoms which are involved in the formation of this PCl5, those are present at the axial positions, and remaining three chlorine atoms, those are present at the apices like this. So those two chlorine atoms which are labeled with the chlorine 36, those occupy these axial positions which are longer in length, and only these two chlorine atoms, the bonds are longer in length. Because the bonds are longer in length, they are weak and hence can be easily ruptured. So these two bonds can easily be broken, and whatever remaining PCl3, so this PCl3 that is remained, so because of the shorter bond length. So from this one can conclude that in case of PCl5, all the chloride ions, 5 chloride ions are not equivalent. All the chloride ions are not equivalent. How we have assigned this? Because while preparing the PCl5 molecule, we have used this chlorine, which is chlorine 36, which is radioisotope, and this radioactivity of chlorine lies with this HCl when this PCl5 is treated with water. So the hydrolysis reaction with PCl5 that gives this product, which indicates that out of the 5 chlorine atoms, there are two types of bonds exist between PCl5. One type of bond that is known as a axial bonds, another is known as a equatorial bond. So this indicates that all the products are not equivalent with their structure. So there are two different types of bonds. So this is how one can determine the structure, and in conclusion, one can say that by using the radiochlorine, one can easily solve the structural equivalence as it is arised in case of the determination of PCl5 molecule structure. So this is about the structure determination. First that we have studied, the reaction that is we have studied is known as a esterification, that is known as a formation of a ester, where again we have used the radio oxygen or the isotope of oxygen. In this case, we have used the isotope of chlorine, that is 36. Now, the third, which is a very important application, is in analytical chemistry. So how the technique of radio tracer technique that is utilized in analytical chemistry, this is method is known as the isotopic dilution method. Sometimes the question may be twisted that discuss the isotopic dilution method or discuss the applications of radioisotopes in analytical chemistry. So both meaning the same. So how the isotopic dilution method that is used in resolving the problems in analytical chemistry, particularly this particular method is useful in medical field. Suppose by some accident, if a human being that met with the accident, first thing that happened, that is the blood that is lost from the patient who met with the accident. So normally the doctors advise or administer the blood so as to maintain the level of blood in the accidental patient. We know normally the human being contains about 5 to 6 liters of blood in the human body. But if he met with an accident, first of all, the loss of blood takes place. So doctors, the physicians, they thought of how much blood that was lost during the accident of a patient. It is rather difficult how much quantity of blood that is lost and how much quantity of blood is to be administered for the patient who's met with an accident. For this purpose, the isotopic dilution method that is used in analytical chemistry. So what happens here? The patient who met with an accident, 1 ml of or 1 cm cube of blood that is taken out. You have to listen very carefully. This is a very simple method. And from the patient who met with an accident, 1 cm cube of blood that is taken out, and to this sample of blood, sodium chloride, they are having sodium 24, which is a radioisotope that is mixed with this blood which is taken from the patient. 1 cm cube of blood is now mixed with sodium chloride, that is a sodium 24, which is an isotope of sodium. Normal sodium is sodium 23, 1123, but this is not radioactive, but this is a radioisotope of sodium in the form of sodium chloride. So when this radioisotope of sodium in the form of sodium chloride is mixed with 1 cm cube of blood, which is taken out from the patient, and here this is blood is very well thoroughly mixed, and again 0.1 cm cube of this blood which is mixed with the radiosodium is taken, and the radioactivity of this blood which contains radiosodium is measured. Say for example, this is a S1, and here remaining 0.9 cm cube because we have taken 1 cm cube of blood, from which 0.1 cm cube of blood that is taken and the taken out, and the radioactivity is measured. It is known as S1. Remaining 0.9 cm cube of blood, what we call this is a capital Y. It is again re-injected into the patient or into the human body, which contains sodium in the form of this isotope as sodium 24, and after about 15 minutes, which are required for proper circulation of this re-injected blood and for proper homogenization of this blood with the patient's body. So after 15 minutes, again 1 cm cube of blood that is taken out. Now this blood is taken out. Now this blood, which has already mixed with the entire blood content of the patient, now this contains the sodium in the form of sodium 24, which is taken out, and the radioactivity of this blood is again measured. Say this is a S2. Now what happens? The physicians decide how much blood that is lost during the accident. Now our aim is to calculate the quantity of blood that is lost. For example, we denote this as a capital X. So Y into S1 upon S2, that is the quantity of cubic centimeters. So this is the quantity that is required to be administered for the patient. So this is known as the isotopic dilution method, where the method in this isotopic dilution analysis method, just now I have mentioned that 1 cm cube of blood is withdrawn from the patient, and it is labeled with a solution of sodium 24 in the form of a sodium chloride. Just now I have shown this initial, and 0.1 cm cube of this blood is again taken, and the radioactivity of which is measured. Say for example, this is S1. The rest of the labeled sample of blood containing 0.9 cm cube of blood, which we call as capital Y, is again re-injected into the patient, and after about 15 minutes, the period that is required for the circulation and homogenization of the blood, once again 1 cm cube of blood that is taken out, and its radioactivity is determined. For example, it is capital S2, which is shown here. With these two measurements, that means we know the initial radioactivity, we also know the final radioactivity after minutes. So with these two values, we can calculate the unknown volume of blood that is present in the body. So the value that is present in the patient, this particular value determines how much blood is there in the patient patient's body and how much blood is to be administered. So this is a very important outcome of these radioisotopes. Then one more application is there, that is a fourth application, which is very simple, but the concept is rather difficult to understand. So if you go through your textbook, then it is very difficult, but the technique is very simple. You know that all over the world, the archaeological survey was carried out. Suppose, for example, if a fossil that is found anywhere in the universe, then normally the age of which is to be determined, which is in the form of years. Say, for example, sometimes 5,000 years fossil is found, or some 3,000 years back the animal skeleton was found, or sometimes a human body that is found in glaciers, which was deeply buried in glaciers. So how can we determine the age of these fossils? For this purpose, the age determination that is known as the carbon-14, that is a dating by carbon-14 isotope. This is the only suitable method by which nowadays only very small quantity of the sample that is required. So in determining the age of an unknown fossil or unknown human body, we require only milligram quantity of the species that is required, and by using this technique one can determine the age of a particular species. So in this case, I would like to tell you in very brief sentences that, as we know, our atmosphere contains carbon dioxide. This carbon dioxide contains a constant weight or constant amount of carbon in the form of carbon-14. So our environment or the atmosphere which contains this carbon dioxide, which contains a constant amount of carbon in the form of carbon-14, which is a radioisotope. This carbon-14 is also present in living animals or all living things, such as in our body also this carbon-14 is also present. Now suppose, for example, if by some means the animal or human body dies out and one cannot find it for some, say for example 1,000 years or so, how can we determine when the death was took place? In order to arrive at this particular case, just now I have told you that carbon dioxide contains carbon in the form of carbon-14, which is present in the atmosphere, which is a constant value. So this carbon-14 is present in the atmosphere, which is a constant value. The same radiocarbon, that is carbon-14, is also present in all living things, that is plants, animals, and in human beings. So these two values are almost constant. That means carbon-14 that is present in atmosphere and carbon-14 which is present in living things, that is a constant value. But when these living animals or human being that dies out, at this particular instant, this carbon-14 that is present in the body of these animals or human being, that starts to steadily decreases. So the amount that is present in the living things, that immediately starts to decay, or the amount starts to decrease very steadily. And because the steady decrease in the amount of carbon-14 in the dead body of any plant or animal, so this a sample of such that is taken in milligram quantity, and the amount of the carbon-14 that is measured, and by knowing the quantity of carbon-14 that is present in the species and the constant amount of carbon-14 that is present in the atmosphere, so by comparing these two parameters one can decide for how many years the age of a unknown sample was there. So the point to remember here in this case is that when a particular living thing that dies out at this particular instant, a steady decrease in the quantity of this radiocarbon takes place. So there is a steady decrease or decay of this carbon takes place. And when we determine whatever amount of carbon that is left after the death of an animal, we can compare this quantity with carbon-14 amount that is present in the atmosphere. So by taking the difference of these two values, one can determine the age of an unknown sample. So this is in brief, that is how the age can be determined. Here, I would like to give you the scientist, the credit that is goes to the scientist that is known as a Willard F. Libby. You should remember this name of the scientist because a MCQ type question may be asked on this. The carbon dating process was discovered by the scientist. The scientist name of the scientist is a Willard F. Libby. So whatever credit that is nowadays, it should be given to the noble work of this Willard Libby. Now here, the entire phenomena that is explained here, that each radioisotope, that is just now we have discussed so many isotopes which contains, it is characterized by the rate of decay. What is the rate of decay? It is a process by which unstable atomic nucleus loses energy by radiation such as alpha or the alpha beta particles, etc., and which remains constant under the circumstances, all the circumstances of temperature, pressure, and the chemical environment. With this understanding, the radioisotopes can be looked upon as nature's atomic clocks, recording the passage of time since the birth of the universe in terms of the atoms, those are decayed from the birth of this species. The measurement of residual radioactivity, just now we have measured the residual radioactivity that is present in the dead animal. One can determine the age of an unknown sample. And just now I mentioned that Willard Libby first developed a technique of dating of historic and archaeological organic samples by the carbon-14 content that is present in such samples. For this great work, he was also awarded by a Nobel Prize in the year 1960. The technique is based on the fact that the preserved object, whatever objects those are preserved, contains a measurable amount of radioactive carbon in the form of carbon-14, which is shown here. Though it has a half-life of about 5,730 years, this is having the half-life period. So this is the years that is required to completely diminish this carbon-14. A small amount of carbon-14 is also present in atmosphere, mainly in the form of carbon dioxide, which I have shown here. So here, whatever carbon is there, that is in the form of carbon-14, in the form of carbon dioxide. So this carbon dioxide contains this C14, the small amount of carbon dioxide that is available to living plants at all times, as we know. So plants take up this carbon dioxide and they re-emit oxygen after the process of photosynthesis. Once the life processes are stopped, that means when the living things are died, carbon-14 is not taken up by the plants, because when during the living process, the animals and plants, they continuously take up the carbon-14 from the carbon dioxide. But as soon as these living things dies out, the process of taking up the carbon dioxide, that is stopped. And the carbon dioxide, that is C14, is not taken up by the plants and the animals, and the amount of it in the plant tissue begins to diminish. That means there is a steady decrease in the quantity of carbon-14. So one can measure the radioactivity due to carbon-14 of living wood or living animal and compare this with the radioactivity of the preserved wood and or a charcoal. From these values, one can calculate the age of preserved historical object using a known half-life period of carbon-14. So it is possible to date the organic objects of 60,000 years, and even older objects we can determine the age of such objects. So the sample that is needed for such analysis is, for such modern analysis, is even less than 0.01 gram for the radioactivity measurement. So this is how we have to compare the radioactivity that is present in the living animal and the radioactivity that is present in the human being, or in the same sample we can compare the age, and this is how we can determine the age of any living thing or the fossil sample that is obtained in the world. So this is how I have completed the topic that is named as the nuclear chemistry. So far we have finished the two topics, that is the study of F block elements, wherein we have studied the lanthanide series and actinide series and all the related properties in these two series. Secondly, we have just now finished the topic that is known as the nuclear chemistry. Both these topics are very, very important from the examination point of view. In due course of time, I will post the notes of all these two topics. So from next week onwards, we shall begin with the topic under the coordination chemistry. There are two topics which are included under this coordination chemistry, that is the thermodynamic and kinetic aspects of metal carbonyls, and secondly the topic that is known as a inorganic reaction mechanism. Similar to that of organic mechanism, we have to study the inorganic reaction mechanism. So these two topics are also very important, but these two parts which are included under coordination chemistry, those are very simple to understand, provided you have to listen these topics very carefully and attentively. So I would like to stop here today, and also